Poor girl with her baby gets rejected at checkout. Suddenly, the Millionaire CEO steps forward and the fluorescent lights of the small supermarket buzzed faintly, casting their sterile glow over aisles lined with fruits, milk cartons, and canned goods. For most people, this was an ordinary place, an everyday stop where wallets opened casually and credit cards swiped without thought. But for Kareena Kpoor, this supermarket was a battlefield, and every coin she carried in her trembling hand was a weapon of survival. Her coat, a dull red now frayed at the sleeves, bore the story of countless winters. Kareena had bought it years ago when life was kinder, when her husband was still alive, and when her baby girl hadn't yet learned how cruel the world could be. Now, that coat was all she had to shield herself and her daughter from biting winds and colder stares. Beside her stood little Anya, barely 4 years old, clutching a cupcake she had spotted in the bakery corner. A single candle flickered gently on top, though it wasn't lit yet. Today was Anya's birthday. Kareena had promised her, though her heart broke making that promise, that she would at least have a cupcake, even if there was no party, no gifts, no guests. Just a candle and her mother's love. At the checkout counter, Kareena placed a carton of milk, a small bunch of bananas, and the cupcake. She hesitated before putting down the bread. She had almost left it back on the shelf, afraid the coins in her palm wouldn't stretch far enough. But she couldn't deny her daughter the taste of even a simple meal. The cashier, a young woman with perfectly polished nails and an indifferent gaze, scanned the items without looking at Kareena. "That will be $12.40, she said flatly. Kareena's fingers shook as she emptied her pockets. A waterfall of coins clinked onto the counter, quarters, nickels, dimes, all worn with age. She started counting them with quiet determination, whispering the numbers under. Her breath, $1, $2, $3. Behind her, impatient sighs began to rise from the line. A man in a leather jacket muttered, "Unbelievable. Who even pays with coins anymore?" A woman whispered to her teenage son, "Some people shouldn't even come here if they can't afford basics." Kareena heard them all. She felt the burn of shame crawl up her cheeks, but she didn't stop. Her daughter's birthday was worth every ounce of humiliation. As she counted, Anya's wide blue eyes looked up at her mother with innocence, unaware of the cruelty around her. She held the cupcake gently in both hands, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. "Mama," she whispered, "will we light the candle when we get home?" Kareena forced a smile. "Yes, my love, we will." But when she finally counted the last coin, her heart sank. $11.50. She was short. Exactly 90 cents short. She looked at the cashier, her lips trembling. I'm sorry. Can you please remove the bread? I don't have enough." The cashier rolled her eyes, picked up the bread, and rescanned. Now it's $11.80. Still short. Kareena's face turned pale. She searched her pockets again desperately, even checking the lining of her old coat. Nothing, just lint and emptiness. She turned to her daughter slowly, her eyes stinging with tears. But before Kareena could speak, a voice cut through the air, deep, calm, and filled with authority. "I'll take care of it." Kareena froze. The cashier's eyes flicked up, surprised. So did the impatient customers behind. Standing just a few feet away was a tall man in a black overcoat, his dark scarf wrapped neatly around his neck. His jawline was sharp, his eyes deep with intensity. He looked like someone who didn't belong in such a modest supermarket. His name was Youraj Singh, a name that many knew, though Kareena had no idea who he was in that moment. Youraj had been silently observing. He had seen the coins, the trembling hands, the little girl clutching her cupcake. And something in the scene had struck a chord deep within him. The cashier blinked. "Excuse me, sir," I said. "I'll take care of it," Youraj repeated firmly, pulling out a sleek black wallet from his coat. He slid a crisp bill across the counter, more than enough to cover Kareena's purchase. The people in line fell silent. The muttering stopped. Even the man in the leather jacket lowered his eyes, ashamed. Kareena's lips parted, her eyes wide in disbelief. "No, sir, please, I can't." Youraj looked at her, his gaze steady yet kind. "It's not charity," he said softly, so only she could hear. "It's humanity." Kareena's heart clenched. No one had spoken to her like that in years, not since her husband passed away, leaving her to face the world alone. The cashier quickly packed the groceries. Anya, still holding the cupcake, looked up at Youraj with pure innocence. "Are you my birthday angel?" she asked. The entire line went quiet again. Youraj, caught off guard, felt something stir in his chest. He knelt slightly, meeting the AI little girl's eyes. "Maybe I am," he said gently, smiling for the first time in a long while. Kareena's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. She whispered, "Thank you. Thank you so much." Youraj nodded. "Take care of her. She deserves the world." And with that, Kareena picked up the small grocery bag and took Anya's tiny hand in hers. She felt lighter, though the coins in her pocket were gone. Because in that moment, she had been reminded that kindness still existed, that humanity was not dead. But what Kareena didn't know was that Youraj Singh was no ordinary man. He was a self-made millionaire CEO, known across the city for his brilliance and wealth. Yet here he was, standing in a simple supermarket, touched not by luxury, but by the sight of a mother's love and a child's hope. And this single encounter would change all of their lives forever. Kareena Kpoor stepped out of the supermarket into the cold evening air, her daughter's tiny hand clasped firmly in hers. The grocery bag swung lightly from her wrist, holding milk, bananas, and the precious cupcake. To most, it was a meager collection of food. To Kareena, it was survival, and today, it was also a promise kept. Her heart still raced. She replayed the moment again and again in her head. The stranger's voice cutting through the silence, the way he had said, "It's not charity, it's humanity." She had never heard kindness spoken so firmly before, almost like a command. But Kareena didn't know who Youraj Singh was. For her, he was just a kind man, a passerby with compassion. That was enough. Youraj's reflection inside his sleek black car, Youraj sat quietly, staring out at the dimly lit streets. His driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror, but didn't dare speak. Something had shifted in his boss's demeanor. Youraj was not a man easily moved. He had built his empire brick by brick, through sweat, sleepless nights, and relentless determination. He had known poverty in his childhood, the sting of rejection, the humiliation of empty pockets. His father had been a factory worker, an honest man who believed in amanatdari, honesty, and dignity, even when life gave them nothing but hunger. Youraj's rise from that world to the throne of CEO was fueled not by privilege, but by mehnat, hard work, and an unshakable belief that no wealth was worth losing one's insaniyat, humanity. And yet, despite his millions, despite the skyscrapers that bore his company's name, Youraj often felt something missing, a hollowness. Today, in that small supermarket, a mother's trembling hands and a little girl's innocent eyes had touched the very core of him. "She deserves the world," he had said to Kareena. But deep down, he wondered, what kind of world have we built, where a child's birthday cupcake depends on 90 cents? The cupcake and the candle. That night, in their tiny one-room apartment, Kareena placed the cupcake carefully on the rickety table. The single candle stood tall, its wick glowing as she lit it with the last match she had. "Happy birthday, Mary John," she whispered, kissing Anya's forehead. Anya clapped her small hands together, her eyes sparkling with joy far beyond the size of the cupcake. She blew out the candle and hugged her mother tightly. "Mama, today was perfect." Kareena smiled, though her heart ached. The cracked walls, the leaking ceiling, the empty cupboards, they all screamed otherwise. But she had taught herself one thing. Poverty may take away comfort, but it should never take away dignity or hope. The unexpected encounter. The very next day, fate tied their lives together again. Kareena, desperate for work, had taken up cleaning, shifts at a local office building. It was hard labor, mopping floors, scrubbing toilets, carrying trash bags, but it kept bread on the table. That evening, as she pushed her cleaning cart down the marble-floored hallway of one of the city's most prestigious towers, she nearly collided with a group of executives stepping out of the glass elevator. And there he was, Youraj Singh, tall, commanding, his tailored suit a sharp contrast to the world she belonged to. But his eyes, the same ones she had seen at the supermarket, softened instantly when they landed on her. "You," Kareena whispered before she could stop herself, her voice caught between recognition and disbelief. Youraj paused. The executives around him continued talking, but he raised a hand, dismissing them for a moment, his gaze fixed on Kareena. "You're the woman from the store," he said gently. Kareena lowered her eyes in embarrassment, clutching the mop handle tightly. "Gee, I work here sometimes. Just small jobs." Something stirred in Youraj again. Here was a woman who could have begged, could have asked for more after yesterday, but instead she was here, mopping floors, earning her bread with dignity. This was amanatdari. This was mehnat. "Your daughter?" he asked softly. "How is she?" Kareena blinked, surprised he remembered. "She's happy. Yesterday was her birthday. You made it special for her." For a moment, neither spoke. It was as if two worlds had collided again. And yet, instead of breaking apart, they found a strange, fragile thread binding them. Seeds of respect later that night, Youraj couldn't sleep. His mind kept drifting back to the tired woman in the red coat, pushing a mop with quiet dignity. So many in his world wore masks, smiles painted for deals, handshakes dripping with hidden greed. But Kareena? She was raw, real. There was no pretense, no greed in her eyes, only survival and an unshakable pride. And then there was her daughter, whose innocent question had echoed in his mind all night. "Are you my birthday angel?" Perhaps, unknowingly, that child had touched a scar in him. For years, Youraj had buried his own pain, the birthdays he had spent hungry, the nights when his mother had gone without food just so he could eat. He had promised himself then that he would build a life where no child of his would ever know that pain, and yet, here was Kareena and her little girl, living the same struggle he once had. Youraj knew then, their paths had crossed for a reason, the spark of humanity. The next morning, as Kareena finished her shift, she found a folded note tucked inside her cleaning cart. Her first instinct was suspicion. Had someone left trash behind? But when she opened it, her eyes widened. Inside was a message, handwritten in neat strokes. "True strength is in dignity, not wealth. Keep working hard. You are not unseen. Y.S." Beneath the note was an envelope. Inside lay money, enough to cover her rent for 2 months. Kareena's hands trembled. She wanted to reject it, to scream that she wasn't a beggar. But something about the note, the words about dignity, about her struggle being seen, stilled her anger. Whoever this man was, he wasn't trying to humiliate her. He was trying to honor her mehnat. Her heart swelled. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible, and far above, in the top floor of that tower, Youraj Singh stood by his window, looking out at the city. His empire stretched before him, but his thoughts were only of a woman in a faded red coat and a little girl with a cupcake. The journey of humanity had just begun. The weeks that followed the supermarket encounter were not easy for Kareena Kpoor. Life never magically softened for the poor. Rent was still overdue, the electricity still flickered as if it might go out at any moment, and the cupboards remained nearly empty most days. But there was something new that hadn't been there before. Hope. The folded note from Youraj Singh still lay tucked inside Kareena's old purse, its ink slightly smudged, but its words burning bright. True strength is in dignity, not wealth. Keep working hard. You are not unseen. Every time Kareena felt her knees buckling under the weight of exhaustion, she would read those words again. She didn't know why, but she believed them. She believed him. The morning shift one chilly morning, Kareena arrived at the glass tower for her cleaning shift. The sun had barely risen, yet the city was already alive with horns, footsteps, and hurried voices. Inside, the marble floors gleamed, but Kareena knew every corner that still bore dust, every stubborn stain that resisted scrubbing. She worked silently, her scarf tied firmly, her red coat worn but clean. Anya had been left with a kind neighbor, who sometimes watched her in exchange for Kareena's leftover meals. As Kareena mopped the empty corridors, her mind wandered. She thought of her husband, taken too soon by illness, leaving her with nothing but a child and broken dreams. She thought of the nights when she had gone hungry so her daughter could sleep with a full stomach. Yet even through those storms, she had never stolen, never lied, never betrayed anyone's trust. Her father's words always echoed in her ears. Zindagi. इंसानियत और अमानतदारी के साथ गुजरनी चाहिए. गरीबी से कोई शर्म नहीं, बेईमानी से है. And so, she kept working. Youraj's observation from the top floor, Youraj often found himself pausing by the large glass windows that overlooked the lobby. He wasn't a man who had time for distractions. His schedule was carved to the minute, his empire too vast for idle thoughts. Yet somehow, his eyes always searched for her. He watched the way Kareena worked, not just with her hands, but with her soul. She never slacked, never cut corners, even when no one was watching. There was an elegance in her struggle, a quiet dignity that reminded him of his late mother. One evening, during a meeting with his executives, Youraj overheard them complaining about janitorial delays. "We should outsource," one said dismissively. "Cheap labor is everywhere." Youraj's gaze hardened. He slammed his pen down and said, "Cheap labor? Or honest people breaking their backs for pennies? Learn to respect those who keep these walls standing." The room went silent. None dared to argue further. The envelope returned. That night, Kareena approached Youraj's office timidly. She had saved enough from extra shifts to cover part of her rent, and though life was still difficult, she couldn't bear to keep the envelope he had once left for her. When she entered, Youraj looked up from his papers. He was surprised, but gestured for her to speak. "Sir," Kareena began softly, placing the envelope on his desk. "I cannot keep this. You helped me when I needed it most, and I will never forget that. But this money, this is not mine. I would rather earn every morsel with my hands than take what I cannot repay." Her voice trembled, but her eyes did not. They glowed with conviction. Youraj leaned back, studying her. A silence stretched between them. Then slowly, a rare smile touched his lips. "You remind me of someone," he said finally. "My father. He too would rather starve than accept a single coin he hadn't earned." Kareena blinked, surprised. She expected anger, maybe disappointment, but instead she found respect in his eyes. "You've returned something that others would have clutched greedily," Youraj continued. That is amanatdari, and that, he tapped the envelope gently, is priceless. Kareena lowered her gaze. I only did what was right. And that, Youraj said firmly, is why you will never remain unseen. Anya's Innocence 1. Saturday afternoon, Kareena brought Anya along with her while finishing a small cleaning task at the building. The little girl, dressed in her clean white frock, skipped across the lobby floor, her laughter echoing against the marble. When Youraj happened to walk by, she stopped suddenly and pointed at him with wide eyes. Mama, it's the birthday angel! Kareena flushed in embarrassment, but Youraj laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that startled even him. He crouched down to Anya's height and said, Not an angel, little one. Just a man who believes you deserve happiness. Anya giggled and whispered, Mama says happiness comes from hard work. Youraj's heart stirred. The words of a mother had already become the child's guiding light. He looked at Kareena, and for the first time he didn't just see a poor widow struggling. He saw strength, honesty, and resilience carved into her very being. The test of character. A week later, Kareena faced an unexpected test. While cleaning the executive lounge, she discovered a wallet lying under the couch. Inside were credit cards, a driver's license, and a thick bundle of cash. Her hands trembled. This money could have paid for months of food, rent, maybe even a better future for her daughter. But Kareena didn't hesitate. She marched straight to the security office and handed it in. Someone must be worried, she said simply. When Youraj heard about it later, he was not surprised. He only felt a deep swell of respect. He called her into his office again. You had every chance to take that money, he said. Why didn't you? Kareena looked at him steadily. Because money can fill stomachs, sir, but it cannot fill the emptiness of dishonor. I want my daughter to sleep with pride in her heart, not guilt. Those words pierced Youraj like an arrow. He realized then, this woman, with nothing in her pockets, carried more wealth in her heart than most millionaires he knew. The growing bond days turned into weeks, and their interactions grew more frequent. What began as fleeting glances became quiet conversations about life, about hardship, about dreams. Kareena spoke little of herself, but when she did, Youraj listened as though every word was sacred. He began to admire not just her resilience, but her philosophy, that dignity, honesty, and humanity were worth more than gold. And slowly, without either of them realizing it, a bond began to form. Not of wealth and poverty, not of pity and gratitude, but of respect, a respect strong enough to change both their lives forever. The city buzzed with its usual chaos, cars honking, vendors shouting, neon lights flickering. But inside Youraj Singh's office, silence reigned. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, staring down at the world he had conquered. His empire was vast, his bank accounts overflowing, but for the first time in years, Youraj felt restless. Because in that world of power and ambition, he had met someone who reminded him what truly mattered. Kareena Kpoor. The poor widow with the frayed red coat, who had nothing yet carried herself with more dignity than the wealthiest woman in his circles. The mother who had raised her child with honesty, who had refused easy money, who had returned every amanat as though the heavens were watching. Her words haunted him. Money can fill stomachs, sir, but it cannot fill the emptiness of dishonor. Youraj clenched his fists. For all his success, he realized he had built walls around himself, walls that money couldn't tear down. Kareena hadn't just crossed those walls, she had shattered them. The crisis one evening, as Kareena was leaving the tower after her shift, she heard shouting near the lobby. Curious, she turned and froze. A man in an expensive suit was berating a security guard. His wallet had gone missing, and he accused the janitorial staff of stealing it. His eyes fell on Kareena instantly. You, he barked. You clean these? Floors. You must have taken it. Kareena's cheeks flushed. Sir, I would never. Lies, he roared. People like you, always looking for scraps. The guard tried to calm him, but the man wouldn't stop. Soon, others gathered, whispering. Some looked at Kareena with suspicion, others with pity. At that very moment, Youraj walked in. His sharp eyes scanned the scene, then landed on Kareena, standing. Tall, tears brimming, but her chin unbowed. What's going on? Yuvraj's voice sliced through the noise. The man turned. Mr. Singh, my wallet is gone, and I know who took it. That woman. All eyes turned to Kareena, but Youraj didn't. He looked straight at the man and said firmly, No, not her. The man sputtered. But how can you be so sure? Because I know her character, Youraj said, his tone like steel. She returned a wallet once before. With every bill untouched, this woman would rather starve than take a single coin that isn't hers, the crowd murmured. The man looked embarrassed. Just then, a security officer rushed in, holding up the missing wallet. Sir, we found this in the parking lot. Must have slipped from your pocket. The man's face turned red with shame. He muttered an apology and hurried away. Youraj turned to Kareena. Their eyes met. In that moment, she didn't need to speak. Her silence, her tears, and her dignity said it all. The proposal of trust later. That week, Youraj called Kareena into his office. She entered nervously, still shaken from the incident, but his calm smile eased her. Kareena, he began, I've been watching, not as a CEO, but as a man who values humanity. You've shown me something priceless. Amanatdari, menat and insaniyat. Qualities I fear this city is forgetting. Kareena lowered her gaze. Sir, I only do what my father taught me. Nothing more. Youraj shook his head. No, you've done much more. You've reminded me of myself. The boy I once was, hungry, but honest, dreaming of a life where dignity mattered more than riches. He leaned forward. I want to offer you something. Not charity, not pity. A job. A real job. As my personal assistant. You'll work directly with me, with fair pay and respect. Your daughter will go to school, and you'll never have to count coins at a checkout again. Kareena's breath caught. 1,000 emotions surged inside her. Gratitude, disbelief, fear, hope. She thought of Anya's future, of nights free from hunger, but more than anything, she thought of dignity. Sir, she whispered, why me? Youraj smiled faintly. Because in a world full of liars, I found someone honest. In a world full of greed, I found someone humane. And in a world full of shortcuts, I found someone who works with dignity. You may think you are poor, Kareena, but in truth, you are the richest soul I have ever met. Her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold back. For the first time in years, she felt seen not as a burden, not as a widow, not as a beggar, but as a human being worthy of respect. The celebration of humanity. Months later, the change was visible. Kareena walked into the tower not in her frayed red coat, but in modest yet dignified attire, her head held high. Anya had started school, carrying books in her small hands instead of hunger in her stomach. But one thing never changed. Kareena's humility. She still greeted every janitor, every guard, every worker with the same respect. She still worked, with honesty, never cutting corners, never forgetting her roots, and Youraj. He found himself smiling more, laughing more, living more. He had discovered that true wealth wasn't in skyscrapers or bank accounts, it was in the dignity of people like Kareena. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the city, Youraj stood beside Kareena and Anya on the rooftop of his building. Anya held a cupcake in her hands, just like the one from months ago. This time, though, there were no coins to count, no shame to endure. Only joy. Mama, Anya said excitedly. Can I light the candle now? Kareena smiled, her eyes brimming with gratitude as she looked at Youraj. He nodded, his heart full. As the candle flickered to life, Youraj whispered, "Happy birthday, little one." And in that quiet moment, beneath the glow of a single flame, with laughter in the air and hope reborn, wealth, poverty, pain, and pride all faded away. What remained was humanity, pure, unshakable, eternal. The moral true wealth is not counted in gold or notes, but in honesty, humanity, and hard work. And sometimes the poorest soul carries the richest heart,